DA George Brockler now taking the podium to talk a little bit about the jury's verdict, which did not go his way. The jury deciding that James Holmes will spend the rest of his life in prison and not get the death penalty, which George Brockler.
Good afternoon. My name is George Brockler.
Let's listen in.
For spelling purposes, the last name is B-R-A-U-C-H-L-E-R. I am the district attorney for the 18th Judicial District. That includes Arapahoe County. Really, this is it's a position I didn't know that I'd find myself in. I think we always knew it could happen, but I want to talk to you about two different groups of 12 people. The first are the names that you got to hear a lot about. Jonathan Blanc, he's 26. A.J. Boyk was 18. Jesse Childress, 29. Gordon Cowden, 51. Jessica Gowie, 24. John Larimer, 27. Matt McQuinn, 27. Michaela Medic, 23. Alex Sullivan, 27th birthday. Alexander Teves, 24. Rebecca Wingo, 34. And Veronica, 6. That's what this case at its heart was about. That whole sentencing phase has been about those 12. There are 70 others who have injuries of varying degrees, and you've seen all of those people in this courthouse, and you got to hear their story about how that guy tried to take their lives back on July 20th, 2012. Nothing about the jury's sentence changes what happened to them or how it impacts their families. And I don't want you to leave here thinking that this today is about something other than them, because it isn't. The other 12 are the jurors that sat there along with their alternates. And as frustrated as I am at not achieving the goal that I thought was justice and that I advocated for as justice, what I want to encourage everyone who hears this or sees this to know is those jurors did a hell of a job. They were called upon to do things that a lot of people wouldn't do to our early portions of jury selection, figured out a way to get out of, or couldn't do. And so including the alternates, these people sat there day in and day out, and they took in all the information, all the horror that you did, but they had the added limitation of not being able to discuss it with another human being, not even each other, for the 3 months that we were in trial. And while I am disappointed at the outcome, I am not disappointed with this system, and I'm not disappointed with this process. I thought death, I still think death is justice for what that guy did, but the system said otherwise, and I honor that. I'll respect that outcome. There are a lot of people to thank for us even being able to be here and get to this point. And I'm going to let a couple other people speak after me too, people who carried a lot of weight through this process, chiefs of their organizations. But I want to start off with my team. This is a team of, and you saw them, some of the finest prosecutors you're ever going to come across. Rich Orman, Karen Pearson, Jacob Edson, and this is its own story, folks, is you got to sit down with Lisa Tish McGuire. Somehow, with 1,000 victims, and when I say 1,000, we're talking family members of the 70 and of the 12, to be able to logistically coordinate them with her and her team, and to keep them informed, focused, and supportive of this process, as long and as tedious as it seemed to be sometimes, that is right up there with miracle work. And my hope is that she will be able to tell her story and theirs a little bit, because what happened here was a vindication, I think, of a Victims' Rights Act that sometimes doesn't get all the attention it should. These folks made it possible for us to get here, and I got to tell you, I'm thrilled with them. We also had 2 investigators, veteran investigators, Kelly Eliason and Mike Heelan from our office, who did everything. all the time. Never asked why, which was probably a mistake on their part, but they just did it. We also had tremendous support from the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Tom Ravenel is here. He is the guy in charge, pretty much, for Colorado. And they put on loan to us Jeremy Phelps, who's a special agent with the FBI. And I don't know how we could have done this without him. He has been a phenomenal support on everything. And the coordination, by the way, between the feds and the state is enormous. I also want to thank Aurora Police Department, specifically the chief, but Craig Apple and Matt Files, who ran this case from the word go. They were tremendous. Here's what's going to happen. There's going to be a time to answer questions, and I'll stick around and answer as many questions as you have for me. But I also want to give an opportunity to these other agencies that, no joke, saved lives out there. I didn't just mean this for the trial, but for the heroes that showed up there when they showed up and the things they did. We'd have put a lot more than 12 pictures up on that screen. This guy went there in his heart with the intention to be the #1 mass murderer in the history of this country, and he had the means to do it. And the only reason he wasn't is because of things out of his control and because of the first responders that showed up to put people back together and to keep them from dying in that theater. So I'm going to turn this over first off to the Aurora Police Chief, Nick Metz.
So things didn't go his way, but nonetheless, DA George Brockler showing a bit of class, starting off his...
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Metz. Last name is spelled M-E-T-Z, and I am the Chief of the Aurora Police Department. I recently became chief here back in March, started the process a few months just before that. And like a lot of you, heard a lot about this case. When I went through the selection process, there was one evening where we had a meet and greet. And during that evening, I had a chance to meet a number of the families of survivors and actually some of the victims from the theater shooting. And when I went through that process, I really wasn't sure if Aurora was going to be the place for me. And it was those folks who have been involved in this ordeal over these last 3 years that actually turned it around for me. Because I saw such strength, I saw such resolute, I saw such incredible passion for not only wanting to see justice, but for such passion for this city of Aurora, a city that is strong, a city that has committed itself to sticking together. I come from a region that has had its share of mass shootings. Nothing to this degree. But I can totally understand the frustration and the hurt and the pain that folks are going through today. I've had the honor and privilege of working with some of the most incredible law enforcement officers that in this country. Officers who on that night went in not thinking about their own safety, but the safety of others, and making sure that they saved as many lives as possible. They did an incredible job. And even though I wasn't here during that time, I'm incredibly proud of these officers and for the work that they do. What I've seen also in these last few months is the relationships that have been built between the officers who responded that night and many of the families and victims from the shooting. They have built incredible bonds, they've built incredible friendships, and for many of them, they've actually become families. And to see that outpouring of affection and to see them coming together as one has just been incredible to see. I think the one thing that we need to really think about today is this. I hear a lot of folks say that, well, the decision's been made, now the families can put closure. Folks, there will never be closure for these families and for these victims. They will carry the scars, they will carry the pain emotionally and physically for the rest of their lives. But the one thing that I want to make sure that these families know is that the Aurora Police Department, the Aurora Fire Department, the City of Aurora, the officers, the firefighters, we're here to help in that healing for them. In whatever way we can to help them move forward, we're going to help them move forward. But please don't ever say there'll be closure, because there's not going to be. I also want to give a special shout out to the Aurora Fire Department. The fire department came in as the professionals that they are, worked real close with the police department, saved many, many lives that evening. And they too have felt the pain of this burden over the last several years. And we can't forget our 911 dispatchers, the ones who took those initial 911 calls, the ones who were the lifelines to those victims who were in the theater, the lifelines to our officers who were responding. They did an incredible job as well. And I also want to thank the FBI, the ATF, and the many other local and federal law enforcement agencies who assisted. Believe it or not, there were over 50 law enforcement agencies who took part in this investigation, not only in the first responder role, but also in the investigation that came after. I also think we need to thank Sheriff Dave Walcher of the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office and his folks who painstakingly and with a great deal of professionalism assured everybody's security, including yourselves, as this trial went on over these last several months. I know that George and I both have had an opportunity to be in contact with Chief Dan Oates, who's now in the Miami Police Department. He was an incredible leader during the initial stages of this event, and I know that he feels very strongly and very hopeful for the families as they move forward. And finally, I need to thank George. We came out of some meetings where George felt real bad, felt somehow or another responsible for the outcome. And I think I share in everybody's sentiments that not only you, but the incredible team that you assembled did an incredible job of taking a case, a very difficult case, and moving it forward. I couldn't be prouder to work with you. I couldn't be prouder to be working with your team. You've done an incredible job, and all I can say is well done. I'd like to introduce Chief Mike Garcia of the Aurora Fire Department.
Good afternoon. Mike Garcia, Aurora Fire Chief, GARCIA. I'd like to basically start off by saying on behalf of the Aurora Fire Department and the city, I would like to express my heartfelt condolences to the families and the victims of 720. I cannot imagine what they've gone through the last 3 years, and seeing what they've gone through today truly brought tears to my eyes. One day I hope that you do find peace, and I agree with Chief Metz that there's never going to be closure, but hopefully you will find peace one day. All of you will always be a part of our hearts and our prayers. I would like to echo what Chief Metz also said about our Arapahoe District Attorney George Brockler and his team for how professional they are. And to me, one of the highest compliments I could give anyone is that word, professionalism. And I really admire the work that you and your team did. Thank you. And in closing, a message to the firefighters, dispatchers, police officers, and other first responders of that tragic night. Thank you. The heroism you demonstrated that night will never be forgotten. Job well done. Thank you.
A couple quick things, especially when you come to the end of this. You forget to thank a couple people. There's 2 paralegals we had that were with us through this, and the stories behind them are incredible too. They did so much together. We combined their names. I don't want to use their last names. Chris and Amber, we called them Cramber, and they were everywhere all the time, and thank you to them. And also to the Attorney General, Cynthia Kaufman. She allowed us to have a guy named Dan Edwards, 40-year attorney, who is an expert on a lot of the jury instruction sentencing stuff, and he was able to be with us up until yesterday when we finished, and now he's up in Denver helping out on that particular case. So to Cynthia and Dan, thank you for your time on this as well. There are a ton of agencies. I can't remember to thank them all, but what I want to do, though, is allow you to ask whatever questions of whomever you want about this. Yeah, Chief said something. Chief Metz, I am responsible for this decision and responsible for our part in whatever outcome that we got in this case. And that was always true even before today. And I've, you know, I would have liked a different outcome for the victims. And I've already apologized to them. But whatever it was that we didn't do well enough to convince all 12, that's my responsibility, and I own that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have now about anything to do with this case or this process. You also know, by the way, Michelle Yee is a great person to go to schedule other stuff as well. And I'm probably screwing something up right now. Michelle, am I supposed to? Oh, I'm fine. All right then. Sir.
Mr. Brockler, you will have some critics come forward saying that you should have taken the deal in the very beginning. How do you address those critics?
I think that's outrageous, and I think it's a mistake. This was a case that was of such a magnitude and such an impact on this community. And look, let's be candid here. This is a guy who's a first-year neuroscience PhD candidate student who spent nearly 3 months planning the death of not one, not 10, but hundreds of human beings from this community. He was only able to kill 12 and injure 70. And for that, we're thankful, but that's the magnitude of this crime. And candidly, if this case comes in the door tomorrow, and I pray to God it does not, there's about a 99.9% chance we'll be right back in there fighting for this. I'm anxious to hear from the jury. I'm anxious to hear what it was that however many of them that didn't get convinced got hung up on, and that'll tell us a lot more. But this is not a case for one person to say, I'm going to take this away from the public. And remember this too, and we can talk about this now. Public defenders came to me back in, shortly after I took office to say, just plead this out. And what they said was, here's our reasons why. And I said, here's what I want from you before I decide to make that deal. I want to have my own doctor take a look under the hood and ask this guy questions. I want the notebook, and I want his entire medical and mental health history. And they said, you get none of it. And I said, then that's an easy choice for me. We keep moving forward. And because of that decision, this community knows everything about this case, to a large extent, too. You all have been jurors. You heard every instruction, every piece of evidence that those jurors did. They know nothing more about this case than you do. And that's only because we went through this process. This kind of a crime cries out for the community's involvement in the sentence. We made that possible, and I'd do it again. Sir.
You have to talk to the victims' families and survivors before making a decision to move forward.
Yep.
What were those conversations like as you weighed the opinions of the people?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And frankly, there's a lot of victims back here that are with us right now that will be happy to tell you, because they've told me, hey, we didn't agree with your decision to move forward. This was never about 100% of anybody being one way or the other. But I did spend time, and Lisa helped me with this quite a bit, multiple phone calls throughout this process to get input on what they wanted to see and why they wanted to see it. And at some point, a decision had to be made. I made that decision, and we moved forward. And, you know, even for the victims' families that didn't agree with the decision, that wanted this to be over sooner, God, I respect them, and I love them for being willing to stand with us through this process. And I got to tell you, it wasn't easy. You want to see a look of relief on someone's face? You be in that jury commissioner's room when we got back that guilty verdict on, on the guilt phase. Boy, there was a lot of people that were incredibly relieved. But they hung with us despite not agreeing with every decision I made. And I respect that, and I appreciate that. And they'll be able to tell you how they feel about it and how they feel about me and what I did. But there was never unanimity on the decision to be made here. And you wouldn't expect that with this many people.
Is there anything you would do differently now, sir, looking back?
In terms of which part? Just any part of it?
Where we are today?
I don't know yet. I mean, I want to see, I want to hear from the jurors. I mean, they're part of this community too. They were the part that we wanted to put this case on in front of so they could tell us what they believed a just sentence was. Now, whether it's 11-1 in favor of death or 1-11 in favor of death, these are things you want to know and that me as a decision maker that represents this community and criminals, I want to know that too. Hearing those things might give me some indication, but let's be honest about something else. This case went remarkably smoothly. We got through 3 different verdicts very quickly on evidence that was contested mightily by the other side, by a well-funded and very experienced side. So whatever decisions we might have made differently, it wouldn't have kept us, I think, from getting to this point right here. The issue will be, what was it that hung up that juror or those jurors from making death? And by the way, I don't think anybody out there who did sit and watch on TV or on their computers this case as a juror should be critical of them. This is a matter of extreme conscience, and I trust that that's what hung them up. At the end of the day, whatever it was they heard, they believed in their heart, they could not vote for death. I understand that. Sir.
Poured your time, your heart, your effort into this case. Describe to us your level of disappointment right now.
You know, it's not personal disappointment. I mean, that'll probably come later, you know, after the beers and stuff. But right now, it's the disappointment and hearing it as Judge Samore is reading those verdicts, hearing it in those soft sobs and those moans from those family members of the people that we can't ever see again. That's the part that gets me, is I asked them to trust me and to follow me, and I would try to get them to a place that I thought was justice, and I came up short. And that's my fault, and that's what hurts. I think I did a fine job, I guess, at what we did in the courtroom. I'm okay with how we did. I don't know. I feel for them. I'm sorry for them. Yes, ma'am.
If among yourselves and the victim families we couldn't agree on whether death was an appropriate sentence to seek, and if in the country we're divided on it, is it too high a bar to expect the jury to come back unanimously now? Is it just too hard to get a death sentence?
That's a pretty heavy question. I don't think this case is a litmus test on that. I mean, listen, there's a lot of issues that were in this case that made a lot of people, some of you here, question the decision to seek death because there was mental health issues. And I think what we've shown is mental health is not a term that gets you protection from your evil conduct. It is something to be considered and weighed, but this jury moved very quickly through the not guilty by reason of insanity plea, and they moved very quickly through a weighing of the aggravation versus what was almost entirely mitigation based on his parents and these claimed mental health limitations that he had. They moved very quickly through that. So I think there's some positive out of this, but I don't think it's too high of a bar. And I mean, to the extent that someone wants to ask if we should not have that tool in the prosecutor's toolbox, absolutely not. I mean, what I said in that closing yesterday is true. How do you take someone who wants to murder hundreds, was successful at 12, and treat them like someone who killed one? How is that justice on any part of this state or in any part of this country? That is not justice. But this is a decision for the community. The jury made that decision. I will respect and live with that decision.
How important do you think the mental health component was to the decision the jury made?
Well, again, we don't know. And you know what's confounding about it is how, I'll tell you, the part that I was most nervous for was this second phase with the aggravation against the mitigation. And they moved quickly through it. And so I don't know how much it hung them up or how much it showed up in this third phase where it was finally that decision. I don't have any more phases to look to. If I'm going to vote death or life, it's got to be right now. I don't know the answer. I imagine it played a role. But here's the other thing. Who in their right mind would conceive of murdering hundreds of people and then go out and try to carry it out, especially after all this detailed planning? That in and of itself invites some discussion of mental health. But if our answer is anyone that would do something like this could never be eligible for death, is that the standard we want for the community? Is that the standard we want? If you can think of a crime big enough, evil enough, heinous enough, well, then we're going to give you life in prison. That doesn't make any sense to me. Sir?
Detail about this than we did at the beginning. You've been dealing with the facts of this for so long. You know things that weren't admitted into court. In your closing, you emphasized all of that body armor and the protection that the killer used and how he clearly made it very evident that he wanted to make it out alive. Do you feel, as you sort of intimated to the jury, like he got what he wanted out of this, and how do you reconcile that at the
I don't
end
think
of
there's
all?
any doubt he got what he wanted. And this stuff that you heard during the trial, this is me now going off, this stuff you heard during the trial about him being long-term suicidal and all that, there is no evidence of that at all. The first time he feels bad enough to use the word suicidal are after he's in custody, and not even on the 24th with Dr. Woodcock, later than that, when he's being seen by others. There are jail logs that make it clear that he is denying feeling suicidal or depressed for a long time after. Did he get what he wants? Yeah, obviously he got what he wanted. I don't know.
George, Robert Sullivan was up here a few minutes ago and feels that there may have been an infiltrator on the jury, somebody who went through the whole process just for the purpose of stymieing the death sentence. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is there any indication of that?
Look, that is not where my head is in terms of trying to figure out if somehow justice was thwarted by someone who had a nefarious motive. I don't believe that. I think that, listen, you saw the process for jury selection. It was months long. We weeded out a ton of this community by asking them not only what's your position on the death penalty, which is already something that knocks out a bunch of people, but we said, who can give up 5 months of their life to come to this courthouse every day and sit through this horror? As you might imagine, there aren't a lot of people that fit that bill, and yet we found enough to put together a dang good jury. I just think at the end of the day, whoever it was, one or more, that this was a matter of conscience, and whether it was the mental health issues or something else, they could not, in their conscience, vote for death on these facts. And whether that's something that was a failure of mine in jury selection or a failure of mine in trying to convince them, I own that. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. I can't change it now. Yes, ma'am.
Earlier today, the jury asked for a copy of the scene.
Yeah, right.
On the crime. You had made it very apparent that that's what their decision needed to be about, was what happened in that theater. When the jury asked for that and they got what they wanted in terms of just watching it one more time, did you ever think the verdict might be in your favor in terms of what you wanted, knowing that they wanted to see that?
Well, look, you know, and any attorney that's out here will tell you, trying to figure out what jurors are thinking by their questions and what they ask for, you can make yourself cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over that. But, you know, you'll remember at the end of Phase 2, I said, if this is even a close call for you in weighing the aggravation and mitigation, go back and look at that crime scene video one more time. My guess is that's exactly what they did. Best guess, there was one or more jurors that were on the fence or opposed to moving forward with death, and they said, listen, before you cement your position, just one more time, let's take a look at what this case was really about, and they did it. And I respect them for doing it. Yes, ma'am.
Talk a little bit more about the plea offer and whether it was disingenuous and maybe some of the details.
No, I don't think it was disingenuous at all. I think they did what they thought they needed to do. I was disappointed that they went and put it in a public pleading that they didn't seek to be suppressed, which was clearly a tactical decision on their part. But, you know, at the end of the day, that's what they do. If there's a potential capital punishment case, they show up and offer life on these things. And that's how it went down.
But that wasn't something that you, given the circumstances, were going to accept.
Listen, I told them when they came to me and they made their pitch, I said to them, I am open-minded on this issue, but I need to have certain information so that when I make this decision and members of the community that I serve ask, why did you do this? I can say, this is why I did this. And they said, no, we're not giving you that. We're giving you this little bit of information and you make the decision. No, thank you. No, thank you. Something else that I did that you may be interested in terms of this wasn't a decision I just made in a vacuum. It wasn't just us. You know, I came into this office, I didn't have capital, you know, experience. This was such a big case. We convened. I invited all the prosecutors across the state that had capital experience, capital litigation experience. And we sat in a room in our office and went through Dr. Metzner's report after it came out. I think, did the public defenders come and pitch us at that meeting too? And even invited the public defenders to come pitch us on that. And we sat around for hours talking about this case. What were their thoughts? What was the good? What was the bad? What were the hurdles, the challenges? And got all their opinions. This wasn't a decision I just woke up or got elected and said, let's go get death. It was never, ever like that. Sir?
One more quick one. How surprised were you? A lot of people were predicting a death penalty. A lot of people.
I don't think I'd use the word surprised. I mean, you might not be surprised at all, but we have optimists on our team and we have pessimists on our team. And so when they asked to see the crime scene video, we did all the different possibilities of what it was, made ourselves nutty, and then thought, let's just see what happens. And I know the consensus was, hey, fast verdict means prosecution. But I also held open the idea that these people had been together and worked so well together and gelled together that if one or two or more of them said, this is where my heart is, and we can come back every day, we can watch every video you want, but I'm not moving off this position, I can see them saying, we've done our duty, let's give them the outcome and let's move on. And again, I want to emphasize this, that jury, especially the alternates, can you imagine a more thankless job than, thanks for sitting through all that, we don't care what you think, but you have to keep coming back and continuing to listen to this. I respect those people that went through this process. They're what makes the system work. Sir?
A couple questions.
Yes, sir.
What was the toughest challenge that you believe you faced throughout the trial?
Well, the biggest issue obviously was the mental health issue. We had the one opinion from Dr. Metzner come back, and it came back sane, but there were in my opinion, there were a lot of unanswered questions that needed to be addressed. And we went after that second psychiatric opinion, and frankly, that's not a gimme. I don't know how many times that's happened in the state, but these guys back here wrote a heck of a brief. We came in, we had a closed-door hearing for about a week and convinced the judge we needed one. And by the way, that was fantastic, especially for the public, because that Dr. Reed recorded all 23 hours of that interview. And I got to say, I don't want to move too far into the policy realm. Why aren't we doing that with every one of these? Why aren't we doing that with every psychiatric sanity evaluation so that people can see the answers and see the person and not just read someone's interpretation of it? That was a big difference maker, I think. And when we talk to the jury, I think they'll say that that was impactful for them too. So that was probably the biggest hurdle.
What was, when you heard the actual verdict from the judge, what was the first thought that came to mind?
The sounds behind me. That's the first thing that I thought of. And I just thought, you can take failure for yourself far better than you can take it for others. And that's what I felt like it is. I failed for others. And, that's Michelle taking charge. Hey, Max. Doctor. Sorry. Sure, on TV.
In Dr. Metzner's evaluation,
Yeah.
the court does not agree
Yeah.
there.
No, nothing like that. No. In fact, that's not what he was asked to do. As the initial evaluator, he's asked to determine competency to stand trial, sanity, and look at any mitigation. And he did all those things. But nothing on the competency to be executed. And frankly, he was. Right now. Ma'am.
While we were going through this process, there were two other theater shootings very
Uh-huh.
close together involving people with
Yeah.
probably mental issues. So I was curious as to what your thoughts were as you going through this case while there were other cases, and whether you thought maybe there was a copycat effect.
Yeah, I hope that's not the case. Those people too have had to suffer as well. But my instant reaction was, look, is this going to have an impact on our jury? And if so, how? And two, how different those cases were than ours. Those guys didn't live, right? And there's a reason they didn't live. They didn't spend weeks trying to up-armor themselves to make sure they survived the event. And that makes this particular mass murderer unique. That's why we don't have trials like this, because the folks that are really driven by mental illness don't think like this guy. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, the victims, too. The victims are here. They want to talk. I want to stick around for them, too, to hear what they have to say. Who wants to go first? Miss Larimer? Oh, yeah, thank you. Introduce yourself and spell your last name, and they'll take it from there.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kathleen Larimer. I have two things I'd like to say. The first one, is, for those of you who follow the no notoriety policies, thank you. For those of you who don't, shame on you. I really am sick and tired of seeing a picture with him with the orange hair plastered all over everywhere. The second thing I would like to say is, for those of you who have been in court every day, you recognize me because you know that I have been in court every single day since April 27th. I could not have been in court every single day without the victims' advocates. It just wouldn't have been possible. What they argued for ahead of time to put in place for this trial, to make it possible to sit through the trial, what they did during the times when there were breaks in the trial, that's the only thing it made possible. So I thank them for all of their help, because I'm serious when I say I could never have sat through court for all those days without their help. Thank you.
No, I'll hold.
You know, I guess my name is Tom Teves, and this is my wife, Tiny Karen Teves. George put me up to it. I want to say one thing, is I've talked to you a lot about no notoriety, and I don't want to talk about that today. When George and I talked about this a year and a half or 2 years ago, I was against doing this. But George had no choice. So don't go out there and blame George, because at least half the murder victims' families were for this, and they had the right to have this. And I'm as disappointed for them as they are today because of this verdict. But let's not skewer George Brockler and his team. They did what they're supposed to do and why you pay them. And if you screw that up, you really need to think of what you're doing. Think about the first thing he said. What's the first thing he said? He didn't protect himself. He talked about the 12 victims. So just think about that.
I prepared a statement this time because I knew this day was coming. I'll never be able to say thank you enough to all the first responders and others who saved the lives of Alex's friends and co-workers in the early hours of July 20th, 2012. Nor can I express how thankful I am for how they treated Alex with such respect until he was returned to us. I'll never forget the support that was given to me and my family in the months and now years since that day by all of the staff of the city of Aurora, the Aurora Police and Fire Departments, and Carol O'Shea and her staff of the Victim Advocates. The people of our community here in Arapahoe County and Aurora who come up to us on a daily basis and continue to show us such compassion and understanding that strengthen us to move forward, I thank you. Lastly, I don't have the verbal skills adequately to convey my appreciation to every single person that was involved in bringing this trial to an end. I know that whenever I tried to thank someone for an answer to a question or to alleviate one of my concerns, I was told that they were just doing their job. Well, each and every one of them did their job to the highest level. The journey I'm on is far from over, but the stop along the path that led me here has shown me that there continues to be hardworking people in my community, that love wins every time, and that justice will prevail in the end. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dad. Age before beauty.
Okay. I'm Bill Hoover, and I am A.J. Blake's grandfather. We had him for 18 wonderful years. The only thing that I'm sorry about is I don't have him for another 18. But we don't. We'll survive. He's no longer with us in our midst, but he is here. But he is the one thing that really kept this family together. He still keeps them together. And just a wonderful, wonderful person. And if I ever hear anybody say anything about George that didn't do the right thing, send him to me. Number one, George. Dave?
You know, what we have to remember is why we're here, which is our loved ones. Our loved ones are gone. We will never get to hug them again. I will never get to say I love you, AJ, and have him hug me again. I miss that. That's the last moment I had with him. There's one other person that we don't have here, and that is my mom, who died during this. This individual took lives off of my parents, off of my mom. She is now with AJ. What we have to remember is we could not have gotten through any of this without the kind words, the love and support of everybody, and not just our friends, and not now our friends and our family standing here together. We are here together because we love, respect, and care about each other, even if we don't agree with each other. That's what it's about. Life is about being a participant. You can't sit back and watch it. And our loved ones are gone. Nothing will ever bring them back. The decision that was made is not a decision that I would make or anybody else probably here would make, but it was a decision that was made. Tomorrow, something my mother said every day before we put AJ in the ground was, there it is, Dave. Sun comes up every day. Well, tomorrow the sun is going to come up. We're going to have a little more pain, a little more hurt in our lives, but the sun will come up, and there will still be love in our lives. We have to remember that. We have to remember the victims. Please, if you're watching this, donate to the Victims Compassion Fund. Give to the victims. Give to those who have been wounded the opportunity to have a little fund to help them recover those damages. If you give yourself, that's the biggest gift you can give to anybody. George, everyone, this whole group, Kelly, I worked with you for years. Oh, Gila Monster, Mike Heelan, I love you. I worked the midnight shift with him, chased crooks around with him. These individuals, blood, sweat, and tears into every moment that this was put on in the Aurora Police Department, my brothers and my sisters. You are fine individuals. I love every one of you. You know, I will walk through fire. I would walk into the jaws of death with each and every one of you, because that's what you did that night. Even though you couldn't bring AJ out, you brought others out. God bless you. God bless every single one of you.
Well, we're Sandy and Lonnie Phillips. Most of you know us. We've been here every day but one during the trial. And we have said from the beginning that we didn't care what the verdict was at the end, whether he got life or death. And that still remains true. But I'm really glad we went through this process. I'm really thankful for the leadership of George Brockler. Hope he becomes a Democrat so I can support him in the future. It's been a long-standing joke through this. But I'm very sorry for the families who are in wheelchairs, who will never have their full life back. We've lost loved ones. No, we didn't lose loved ones. Our loved ones were ripped from us, and they were slaughtered in that movie theater. But the jury chose another way, and we have to accept that. But today what was hard for me was accepting it for the others, those who are wounded and living with pain every single day, physical pain. Karen Teaves said on the stand that she had no idea that grief could take on physical pain as well, and it does. Our lives are forever altered. And the thought that this monster gets to have visitation with his parents and gets to receive mail and pictures of his very strange girlfriends is very hard to accept. But that is what is. And all we can do as a group, as a family, as Dave eloquently said a while ago, is continue to support and love each other as we have through this whole process. And my hashtag is love wins, and love does indeed win, because we will be there for each other through thick or thin, right or wrong, for the rest of our lives. So those of you who have been here through this whole thing, we thank you again for the respect that you have shown all of us, the friendship you have given us that we dearly treasure now. And we look forward to those continued relationships. Thank you.
So I just want to echo what you heard about the victims, the Compassion Fund, the ones that are the families that wanted the death penalty. We took, our vote was to get it over with, let us get on with our lives. And now that we don't have the death penalty, we're not going to go through all the appeals. We're not going to go through all the process of having to look at his orange hair again. I hope you guys stop. I hope you guys burn that picture and find something that's more realistic of what he really is, and
Or not show it at all.
you know, we understand you have to say his name to start a story, but you don't have to say it again in every paragraph. We want him to go into oblivion. We want him not to be seen or heard from again. That would be the gift that you could give to us for what we've been through, and thank you for the ones that have honored us on that. And please think about, if you all do it, everybody has an even playing field, and it's fair. And it's fair to us, and it's fair to the victims that have to see his face and hear his name. Please, think of us. Think of the victims before you say his name or show his face.
Thank you.
I'd like to say something. My name is Rich Orman. I'm one of the DAs who prosecuted this case, and I want to talk about my boss, George Brockler. And he came up here and he apologized. I can tell you he has nothing to apologize for. He has nothing to apologize for. He has nothing to apologize for what happened in the courtroom or the decision that he made. It would have been very easy as the elected DA for George to say, okay, I'll take a deal. Because people are going to criticize me in the media and the Denver Post and the Aurora Sentinel. And people are going to criticize me for spending all this money or taking all this effort. People are going to criticize me for that. It's easy to take a deal. I can tell people why I did it, and it wouldn't cost them. He showed tremendous moral courage. Moral courage in doing what he thought was right and in seeking the sentence that he thought was the only sentence that would show that justice was done. And he is to be commended for that, and I thank him for that. Thank you.
Who else? Anybody else? Hey. Anybody else? You guys have questions for anybody else?
Actually, for anybody who's
Yeah.
Touched by this personally and your family, one of the things that was really touching to watch for us.
On the other side of the gallery was how you all took care of each other during this, and reaching across and patting somebody on the shoulder. If anyone who wants to come up and talk a little bit more about the bonds that have been formed here and how that's played into this. We've heard a little about it, but I mean, it was really touching to see.
Well, there was one person I thought was going to go to jail during this, and that was Tom. That didn't happen.
That's because the deputies are really, really good.
No, that's because we're a good family. That's because we talk to each other. That's because we all realize we're in this together. I mean, we are, I guess, a world unto ourselves. You know, we're a community unto ourselves. We have to learn to get along with each other because we're stuck with each other. There's nothing else we can do. We can fight and we can argue if we want to, But at the end of the day, we got to look next door and in the next seat and see that man or woman who has lost so much in our world and realize they're part of our family. That's what it's about, you know. When the animals are at the gates, you have to circle the wagons. And you do that by sharing the strength and love, and when somebody falters, the other one picks them up. And when you're weak, somebody else picks you up. That's the way it is. That's the way the world works. We have to get along, you know? I mean, I hate to sound like John Lennon, but it's true. It's true. At the end of the day, our world is about getting along and weeding out these individuals that mean us harm and doing it in a responsible way. That's what happened here. We tried. My verdict would have been death because he has no value left in this world. He gets to hug his mom and dad. He gets to correspond. We don't get that. We've lost that. But that's the system. But going through this, every one of us, we got each other, you know? We'll always have each other, no matter what. And all I got to do is call and we're around. You know, I can remember in the middle of the night talking to Sandy and Lonnie about feeling like crap, you know? And I remember getting those phone calls. So, you know, my heart bleeds. My sister's without her son. Our family's without a bright light. But we're all in this together. At the end of the day, that's what it's about.
Hi, my name is Lisa Atish McGuire. I'm one of the prosecutors on this case, and I also would like to praise my district attorney for a different reason, and that's because both the prior elected district attorney, Carol Chambers, and George Brockler had the vision to decide that victims deserve to have their rights protected throughout this trial, and they had the vision to decide that they needed to hire a victims' rights attorney to protect the rights of crime victims. And I charged the community is to make sure that we continue to enforce victims' rights just as vigorously as we enforce defendants' rights. Sadly, as these tragedies continue in our community, it's my charge to government officials to make sure that we put money into the enforcement of victims' rights, and we continue to put money into victim compensation funds and to support victims throughout the criminal justice process, because generally it's oftentimes more victimization in the criminal justice process than from the actual crime itself. So I encourage other visionary district attorneys across the country to make sure that victims have access to attorneys who will help protect their constitutional and state rights throughout the process, and to our legislators to continue to fund services for victims of crimes, because I think these victims will tell you without the support they received from the government and from grants in order to get here, to travel here from across the country, to be part of this process would have been much more difficult. So thank you very much for our visionary leaders to make sure that we could protect victims' rights. And to our victims, who honestly, the only reason we could do this case and want to fight as hard as we could was, number one, because we thought the community deserved the prosecution of this case, and number two, because we wanted to honor and protect the rights of our crime victims. So thank you very much, and just remember that liberty and justice for all includes justice for victims.
Her name. I have a picture.
additional questions for the district attorney right here? Let's do a quick gaggle for anyone who has additional questions. Final question.
Pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.